We continue our seminar on Vedic psychology, and today, as I mentioned yesterday, we're going to further our examination of the problem of relationships. So I'm going to follow pretty closely what I put on the board. And what I put on the board, you notice there's some big words. Don't worry about them, I'll explain them. We have to somehow fit everything on one limited space, so big words are sometimes necessary, otherwise so many little words, too many. So, the words have rubbed off too. Complementarity.
Complementarity.
This is the word, complementarity. It's rubbed off. Mind and sense objects. Now what that means, complementarity means a type of relationship of two things, meaning mind and sense objects, or it can be other things, but here, mind and sense objects. Two things, which is a kind of a baffling relationship, in that you're not sure where one ends and the other begins. This word complementarity, actually I took it today because we were discussing this morning, it was in the purport in the class, Srila Prabhupada was talking about atoms and protons and neutrons in his purport as being the energy of the Lord. And then I mentioned in the class something about this field of physics called quantum physics, in which they study these very tiny particles. And so there you see also they use the word complementarity, that something like an electron or a proton or a photon, these tiny, tiny particles. Well, actually that's the problem. Are they particles or are they waves? You see, because depending on how they study them, an electron seems to be a wave, a subtle wave moving in ether, like we hear that sound moves in ether. So, and other times, when it is examined, it appears to be a particle, a point of something specific in a certain location. And they can't really separate these two. They're not the same thing. There's somehow a relationship, but where one ends and the other begins, no one can really say. That's one of the... I'm reading a book on quantum physics now, and this is one of the things the scientist wrote the book, is telling the reader that we do not understand the actual difference between these two, although obviously a particle is different from a wave, you see. That's clear. So this is the sense of the word complementarity. There's a relationship, but you're not really sure if it's two things or one thing, you see. One thing appearing in two ways, or two things that are somehow entangled intimately on a deeper level. So, in our discussion today, the complementarity is between mind and sense objects. And this is a big problem, both ontologically and psychologically. Now this is a big word, ontological, but all it really means is concerning reality itself. The field of ontology and philosophy is simply concerned with what really is, you see. What can we say is real? And of course that's a big question. Some people say everything is an illusion, like the Mayavadis. And some people are what are called naive realists. They believe, like a child just believes in the simple reality of everything. I remember when I was a little boy, I met a friend on the way to school, and we started talking about what we had seen the night before on television. So I said something about, I saw the Lone Ranger or some, one of these old TV shows. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, that was on my TV too." As if in every house, TV is totally different. This is naive reality. So this is what ontology is all about, trying to understand what is real, what is not real. So there is an ontological problem that arises from this complementarity, this baffling relationship between mind and senses. And the problem is one of objectivity and subjectivity. Two more big words. So objectivity simply means that which is out there. You see? Like, objectively, for me, you are all sitting in this room. You see? You are not products of my imagination. I'm not sitting here having a dream that I'm looking at a room full of people, and actually you're not there, so therefore I can sit here and do all kinds of ridiculous things. You see? As if I was alone. If I acted like that, you'd think I was crazy. You see? And then subjectivity means within myself. You see, my own private thoughts and perceptions, how I'm looking at things. So this is the problem, because first I think I should jump to just one verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in which the problem of complementarity of mind and sense objects is raised. And this is in Canto 11, chapter 13, verse... Well, in that chapter, this is a conversation between Uddhava and Lord Krishna. And Lord Krishna is asked by Uddhava this question, that, my dear Krishna, generally human beings know that material life brings great future unhappiness, and still they try to enjoy material life. My dear Lord, how can one in knowledge act just like a dog, an ass, or a goat? It's a very good question. Yesterday we were talking about the conflicted mind, and this is one of the conflicts. This is one of the major psychological conflicts that people are faced with, that we know better, but still we act in like dog, ass, or goat. and this is, one doesn't have to be very, very astute in philosophy to know what Uddhava says here, that this material life brings great future unhappiness. Everybody knows. You see, you don't have to memorize the whole Bhagavad Gita. You don't even have to be a devotee of Krishna to know that as life goes on, all of our attachments, all the things to which we formed attachments thinking that will bring us happiness, they will be removed by time. All of our near and dear ones, we will be separated from them. This body which we're so happy to be in when we're young, which is strong and beautiful in youth, it will get old and shrivel up and become weak and become just aches and pains, and finally there's death. You see? And that's considered the greatest distress of all. So everybody knows that this is in the future. But still, everybody's mad to enjoy themselves now. You see? So this is the conflict. This is a great deal of human mental energy is spent on this. You see, this problem of life. So this is Uddhava's question to Krishna, and then in his answer, Lord Krishna he cites an event that happened millions of years before. This was when the four Kumaras went to see their father and guru, Lord Brahma. And they asked Brahmaji a question. It's a somewhat different question than what Uddhava asked Krishna. But actually the consequence of the question is the same. It's actually the same point, ultimately. And their question, Sanaka Daya Uchu, Guneshu Avashyate Cheto, Gunas Chittasi, Chaprabhu, Katam Anonya, remember that word, relationship. Katam Anyonya Santyago, Mumukshu Atityushaho. So the sages headed by Sanaka said, O Lord, meaning Lord Brahma, people's minds are naturally attracted to material sense objects, and similarly the sense objects in the form of desire enter within the mind. Therefore, how can a person who desires liberation, who desires to cross over activities of sense gratification, destroy this mutual relationship between the sense objects and the mind? Please explain this to us. Now let's look at this question. We know, as devotees, that the real purpose of human life is to achieve liberation from the cycle of birth and death. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the human form is called Moksha Dwara, which means the door to moksha, the door to liberation. And we have to, in this life, open that door. That door cannot be opened by a dog or a cat. You see, they have no such possibility. We were actually, that was in the purport this morning. Srila Prabhupada said, a dog and a cat cannot hear the Bhagavata philosophy. We do not see that any dogs or cats have come to our gathering tonight to listen to Vedic psychology. They do not have that capacity. They do not have that appreciation. Or intelligence. So human beings have that capacity. They have that ability, that intelligence, but we have to use it. So then, getting back to Uddhava's question, he says everyone can see that this life ends up in total distress, in total defeat. So it is incumbent upon the human being to do something about it. You see? And actually, that's the great mission of human life. And even in gross materialistic society, like in this Western culture, where there's really no overarching spiritual principles that are respected. And there's just some vague religion, but religion is a personal thing. It's not really a principle that society as a whole looks to. God consciousness. That's your private thing. You see, and society actually tends to be hedonistic and atheistic. But nonetheless, we see even in such a society, they're trying to solve the problems of this ultimate distress that's waiting for us in the future. The scientists and the medical men are working in their laboratories to try to prolong life. They're hoping for the day when every organ within the body could be replaced when it wears out. You see, perhaps by some computerized component, your brain wears out, so stick a big microchip in there. You see, they have this. It's a kind of scientific vision, but some are taking it seriously. That perhaps biotechnology can evolve to the point where everything can be replaced. Practically, what's left is a machine rather than an organic entity. But still, the life will continue. Still, our consciousness will remain, and we go on in a body that is more like a robot than a biological form. So, in this way, they hope to conquer over death, and in this way solve these inevitable miseries that are waiting for us in the future. So you see, this is the natural human endeavor to seek liberation. This is also a kind of, it's a bid for liberation. You see, that I'll be able to transfer my consciousness into a robotic machine. But then, when that has any problem, I just go to the repair shop. You see, and they just replace parts, and I can just keep going. So death is solved. So this is the natural proclivity of the human being. This is not the goal of dogs or cats. They just live out their life, pursuing whatever sense gratification they can get, and then they die. And they do not have that independence of thought. Human beings do. So this is the first thing, that this is the human mission. The sages have said in their question, speaking about a person who desires liberation, who desires to cross over activities of sense gratification. You see? So this is the human mission. But the sages see a great problem. The great problem is that we have this mind, this human mind, and it is deeply entangled in sense objects. What the sages are saying, Guneshu avishikteto gunas chetasi chaprabhu. The sages are saying that the mind and the sense objects are made for each other. You see, and now we come to this ontological problem. Objectivity versus subjectivity. Where do my private perceptions end and the external so-called real world actually begin? That's a big philosophical problem. That's not an easy thing to solve. And to give you an example, something simple, everyday perception that we have, like a nice smell, the smell of, say, puris being fried, which among devotees and upper class Hindus, this is considered a very nice smell, mouth-watering. You see, puris being cooked is a very attractive smell. So that good smell, where does it exist? You see, does it actually exist in the external world, or does it only exist within me? You see, this is a problem. This is a problem because that object, the smell, we cannot appreciate or we cannot perceive without the mind. That sensation out there has to be fed into our mind, and then our mind is making a judgment about it, whether it is good or bad. Now, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he started a Gaudiya Math mission in Burma. Now it's called Myanmar. And Burma used to be part of British India. India and Burma were once under British rule, the same country. And so still today, there are quite a lot of Indians, people from Indian genealogy who live in Burma. But Burma is mostly, the greater population are more Oriental people, Burmese. They're akin to the people of Thailand and Laos and Vietnam. And they're Buddhists. And their culture, particularly their habits of eating, are quite a bit different from those of Indian people. We don't want to get into that so much. But like Prabhupada someone was once praising in the very early days to Srila Prabhupada Chinese culture. Because Prabhupada was attracting all these naive young people, and they had read different books about Taoism, the Chinese philosophy, and so Prabhupada was talking about India, and so someone was asking, but aren't the Chinese, don't they also have a very, very deep spiritual culture? And Prabhupada replied, Chinese, they will eat anything in the sky except the kite, anything on the land except the rickshaw, and anything in the sea except the junk, the Chinese boat. Sorry.
Understanding is true. It's a fact.
He is detached. So anyway, in Burma and Thailand and those places, Southeast Asia, Indochina, one of their favorite delicacies, they like to take fish and put it in a clay pot, and then cover the clay pot, have a cover on it, and let the clay pot sit in the sun for 2-3 years. So you can imagine what happens to the fish inside. It rots and rots away and becomes a kind of black, very pungent smelling liquid. And this they put on rice. And this, you see, it's like, like I noticed when I was in Malaysia too. This durian fruit. Oh, that's like the pride of Malaysia. You see, everyone loves this durian. It stinks like a dead rat. But but if you're a real Malaysian, then you're supposed to love this durian fruit. You see, so in places like Burma, I mean, if you're real Burmese, then you'll have to, I forgot the name, I used to know the name of this sauce, but I forgot. But you have to have this sauce on your rice, otherwise you're not a Burmese, you're not, also they like it in Vietnam and all those Southeast Asian countries. So this is typical. So this is what they consider to be a good smell. You see, a smell of fish that's been in a pot for 3 or 4 years. Or in Malaysia, they think durian is a nice smell. You see.
Eating ice cream in the toilet,
So anyway, I said Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati established Gaudiya Math in Burma. So when they were making a feast in the opening of this temple, so the devotees were cooking, and they were cooking puris, which is, for those in sattvic mood, a great delicacy, cooking puris and ghee. And the Burmese people in the neighborhood, they were complaining. They were coming, what is this horrible smell? Why are you stinking up our whole neighborhood with this bad smell? So this is the point. You see, we assume when we smell puris being cooked, we think objectively that's a good smell. We think it's out there, There's this nice smell that's it's real. It's there. But actually, it's here. Because our consciousness is inclined to the mode of goodness, so we perceive that smell as being good. You see? And yet again, because we also know that it's better to be in the mode of goodness than the mode of ignorance, we will even insist that this is the real good smell. You see? We will argue with someone, it's a bad smell. No, it's a good smell. See? But what are we arguing about here? This is what I mean. This is the ontological problem. You see? And this is the difficulty of disentangling sense perceptions from the mind. So the Kumaras are pointing this out. You see? And then this brings up all these questions like, that if you've learned even rudimentary philosophy in your school, if anyone went to college and just took one philosophy course, inevitably they bring up this sort of problem. There's the question of, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, so does it make a sound, or does it fall at all? You see? If there's no one to see it, does anything happen? This is a question. So that's there. This is the ontological problem, but this is not really our problem. This is not really what we're focusing on here. But it does impinge on psychology. It is something we should appreciate, especially in relationships and dealing with others, in understanding others. This is important, you see, to keep this in mind, this ontological question, before we try to ram our views down the throats of other people. We need to appreciate the minds of other people and how they're seeing things, and appreciate that maybe our position is not as solid as we may think it is. So this is something, but this is not our main point. The main point is a psychological problem, how to overcome desire. And this is what the Kumaras are focusing on. They're saying, what they're asking us to see is, if liberation means to free the mind of its attachment to sense objects, and this is typically how we think of liberation, of making progress in spiritual life. Everybody, even in Krishna consciousness, we tend to think this way. So if that's what it is, to rid the mind of its involvement in sense objects, then the Kumaras are saying, but then what kind of mind will be left? They're pointing out that the mind is made to perceive sense objects. That the mind itself always considers things in terms of sense objects. Just like here I am speaking to you philosophy. And if I want to be sure that you've understood what I've said, I will ask you, do you see this point? Now, what I just said, you don't see. You know, you don't see multicolored words floating out of my mouth, floating off, and you're looking, oh yes, Swamiji has said that. Yes, I'll write it down. No, we don't literally see, but it's a subtle sense of seeing, of understanding. Where the this tanmatra, rupa, vision, visualization, becomes a symbol of internal understanding. And this is the way our minds work. Our minds naturally gravitate to the concrete for understanding. This is why I'm taking effort here in this seminar to try to make everything clear in concrete terms to you. Otherwise it becomes very difficult. If I speak in all abstract words, if I just speak with words like this, the complementary of the ontological problem is a psychological blah blah blah, you won't understand what I'm saying. You see, our minds don't work that way. Our minds look for concrete objects. This is what the Kumaras are saying. This is what it means to have a mind. So how do you remove the sense objects from such a mind? And similarly, they're asking on the other side, what are sense objects without a mind? You see? Again, like the question of a good smell. A smell that's good, that means it's already within the mind. It's already existing. It somehow exists out there too, but it's already a conception of the mind. And everything, you see, we're sitting here looking at this room, and looking at the pictures and the different decorations, and but we're seeing this according to our minds. We may think, you see, in our conventional conceptions, that this is just the way it is, this room. But no, imagine a fly, an insect, in this room. Imagine how he looks at this room. What do you think he sees this room the same way you do? That we do on the human level of consciousness? Not at all. If we could somehow plug a monitor into the brain of a fly and see the room the way he does, I don't think we would be able to recognize that what he's seeing and what we're seeing is the same thing. It's so different. Just like an insect lands on our arm. Do you really think when the insect alights on our arm that he's aware that he's on the limb of a gigantic creature that in a split second could crush his life with a swat of the hand? No. Otherwise he wouldn't land there. He's landing, he thinks he thinks it's like a mountainside and there are big trees in the form of our arm hairs, and and there are nice edible minerals on the surface. So he's going to take his lunch there. Something like that. Something totally, far out, we would say. But that's his perception, because he has a different mind than we do. So this is what the Kumaras are pointing out, this difficulty. And if the goal of life is liberation, and this is obviously the jnana approach. So the jnanis are very mind-reliant. Mind and intellect reliant. So the four Kumaras are troubled by the fact that the mind, just by its own definition, is necessarily so involved with the sense objects. In fact, we can say sense objects define the mind, and mind defines sense objects. You see? The mind is impressed with the objects of the senses. Our field of understanding, of awareness in the mind, is composed of sense objects. So they're saying, so if mind is made for sense objects, and sense objects are made for mind, and they've said something from a psychological point which is very acute here, that the sense objects pervade the mind in the form of desire. You see, our desires are, they reach for sense objects. This is, again, how desires are defined. Their desire for sense objects. So, the Kumaras are asking, then how is it possible? The purpose of human life is to achieve liberation, but how would it be possible to achieve liberation? You see, using this mind that we have. And what is interesting, Lord Krishna, he goes on to tell Uddhava that Brahma, this question was asked by the Kumaras to Brahma, so Brahma, he thought about this question for a long time, it says in the Bhagavatam. And then finally, he didn't have an answer. It baffled him. And the reason it baffled him, Lord Krishna says, is because Brahma, in his own mind, he is so much involved with his creation. You see? He too is involved with the universe. And he's accepting the universe as being the proper object of our perception and our conception. So when the Kumaras asked him if liberation means to free ourselves of these perceptions and conceptions which we carry in our mind, how do we do that? How is it possible? If this is the mind that we have been given by God, how do we do it? And Brahma also, he thought about that and he said, that's a real problem. And he had no answer. So the Hamsa avatar, Lord Krishna in the form of a swan, because Krishna does not like to see Brahma, who is his representative in terms of Vedic knowledge, he does not like to see Brahma become baffled. So the Lord, so to speak, saved the day, saved Brahmaji's face by appearing there as the Hamsa avatar to speak with the four Kumaras. Now the conversation between the Hamsa avatar and the four Kumaras is a little involved, so I just want to jump to the conclusion or the essence, which is we find in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 13, verses 24 and 25. So Hamsa Avatar tells the Kumaras, Manasa Vachasa Drishcha Grihyate Anyar Upindriyai Aham Eva Nam Mato Anyad Iti Budhyatvam Anjasa. I had this on the board yesterday, the second part of this verse. Here, the Lord is saying, within this world, whatever is perceived by the mind, speech, eyes, or other senses is me alone, and nothing besides me. All of you please understand this by a straightforward analysis of the facts. Now what this is bringing out is, yes, why our mind is like it is. Why our mind is always tuned to sense objects. The mind is our underwear. Prabhupada gave this example. The Shtula Sharira, the gross physical body, is our overwear, the clothes that we see. And everyone has underneath the clothes, the visible clothes, what's called underwear. That's the Linga Sharira, subtle body. So the mind is a covering of consciousness. But just like glove, why is a glove shaped like it is? You see, with 5 receptacles for fingers. It's because the thing that the glove is covering is the original shape. So, mind is a covering of consciousness. This is, I was elaborately explaining to you in these last, since the beginning of the seminar, that all mind is really, what we call the material mind, is really the state of material attraction. So the basis of the material mind is our consciousness, the pure, original, transcendental consciousness of the soul. But the consciousness is flowing in the wrong direction. It's flowing in attraction to matter, and therefore, as this is again the question of complementarity, it takes on the qualities of matter. It becomes a material thing. Therefore we speak of the material mind. because it is conditioned by matter. It works mechanically in a predictable way, as material things do. So, the mind is fitting over the consciousness. Like a glove fits on the hand. And then the gross body fits over the mind. And looks like this personal form. So the actual swarup of this soul is personal. The soul is a person. And that person has a mind. And that mind, that spiritual mind, is made, well, of course it's not made, it's eternal, but it is, so to speak, the design of it, so to speak, is for the perception of objects. And what did I tell you yesterday about that sutra in Vedanta Sutra, which is speaking of the Brahmapuri, the city within Brahman. It's all in this, Vedantic language, sort of mysterious, but the Sanskrit word gram is there, meaning village, and the Sanskrit word bhuta is there in that sutra, meaning objects. Bhuta means, Mahabhuta means sense objects. So this is the real jawbreaker for the Mayavadis, that in their beloved Vedanta Sutra, where Brahman, the glories of Brahman, the liberated state are being described, the sutras say that within this Brahman there is a village. And within the village there are objects of the senses, just like here. So this is one of those things where the Mayavadi clears his throat and turns the page as fast as he can. So even in Vedanta you have a clear indication that the ultimate goal of spiritual endeavor is the village of the Lord, Goloka Vrindavan. And in that village there are things as we see here. There are cows, there are trees, there are peacocks, there are flowers, there is the Jamuna River, there is Govardhan Hill. These are all objects to be perceived by the senses. But they're spiritual objects. The senses are spiritual senses. The mind is a spiritual mind, the body is a spiritual body. You see? But this is the ultimate reality of the mind. That it is based on a original spiritual design, so to say. So, Hamsa Avatar is saying that in reality, all of these objects that we are perceiving are nothing other than Him. You see, because Aham Savasya Prabhavo Mattak Sarvam Pravartate. Everything is coming from Krishna. Everything is Krishna's energy. And everything even in this world is a reflection of the supreme perfection of the Lord in His abode. So nothing in existence is without reference to Krishna. You see? So one should not complain that I can't separate my mind from the sense objects. I've been put in this situation by a God who just means to torment me. It's God who's given me this mind. And my mind I can't help my mind flowing to the sense objects. What can I do? You see? No, one should not point the finger of blame at the Lord. The problem is simply that our consciousness is polluted. And so, therefore, this natural relationship between the mind and the objects of the senses is now going on under the modes of material nature. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not the relationship between mind and sense objects that must be broken. We will hear later, well, I can mention it now, why not? We'll just come to the point. But later in my notes here, I had, there's a verse, but yes, by Devahuti. And she's asking a question of Kapila Dev. Yes, here it is. Here it is. She asks of Kapila Dev, my dear Brahmana, does the material nature ever give release to the spirit soul? This is very much like the question of the four Kumaras to Brahma. They also want to know, how can the mind ever be freed from its involvement in sense objects? So she's asking, does material nature ever give release to the spirit soul? Since one is attracted to the other eternally, how is their separation possible? You see, this is the conclusion of her question. How is the separation? She's considering this separation to be necessary for liberation. This is the same thing the Kumaras are considering in their question. And it baffled Brahma. You see? This question, he couldn't answer it. You see, as Prabhupada points out here in the purport, the question asked by Devahuti of Kapiladev is more or less impelled by the philosophy of voidism. This is the mistake. This is, and even as devotees, there's this tendency to make this mistake. You see, it's actually slipping off the bhakti marg into the jnana marg. And it comes about when we become frustrated, because the jnana marg is arising out of frustration. One becomes frustrated with his interaction with matter and wants to break that relationship radically. And he thinks this is the way to achieve liberation. But Srila Prabhupada says this is more or less a philosophy of voidism. The voidists say that consciousness is a product of a combination of matter. You see, mind can't be separated from all this. Combination is a product, consciousness is a product of combination of matter, and as soon as the consciousness is gone, the material combination dissolves. So in other words, the liberated state, then there's nothing to be perceived at all. There's just void, shunya. This is Buddhism, the dismantling of reality, so that there's nothing left. So this is off the track entirely. Therefore, the Hamsa avatar is saying, no, everything you're perceiving is actually me. You see? Not something to be dismantled, but something to be seen properly. Is that clear? We have to perceive the world around us properly in Krishna consciousness. The problem is when we're perceiving the world as the objects of my sense gratification. Then our mind is always in a state of agitation, disturbed, and that is frustrating for us. And so in the frustrated state, wants to take this radical measure of just negating everything. So this is improper. So this is the first point that Hamsa Avatar makes. Then he says something very interesting. Guneshu avishate cheto gunas chittasi cha praja jivasya deha ubhayam gunas chetu mat atmana. My dear sons, the mind has a natural proclivity to enter into the material sense objects, and similarly the sense objects enter into the mind, but both this material mind and the sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me. Now, I have already made that point, telling you the mind is like a glove covering the hand. But it's called material. Why? Because I've just mentioned it. Because it is acting under the modes of nature. It is acting, ultimately that means it is acting under the false ego. The false ego is the ultimate covering. False ego is the outer wrap of the whole material world. The whole material conception of everything is wrapped in false ego, and the modes of nature work within that wrapping. So, the mind is, as we heard, I think I mentioned it yesterday, Srila Prabhupada says, the spirit soul becomes entangled in material nature when the mind is involved in the false ego. So that mind that is involved in the false ego, that is looking upon the sense objects as mine, as for my gratification, that mind is material. And Hamsa Avatar is saying, that's not you. That's not the spirit soul. And this is the answer. You see, when we're discussing psychology, that very word, you see, we have to discuss it. The Vedic philosophy is, I've been pointing out, is all about psychology. The mind is the laboratory of our spiritual life. But the very word psychology also stimulates speculation, stimulates remembrance of our problems that we have in our mind. And we've agonized for so long about our weaknesses, our propensities to fall into illusion, into forgetfulness, the agitated senses striving to achieve their objects. All of these problems are there. And so when there's an opportunity to discuss psychology, then there's this tendency for different participants to pour out all these problems. You see, what do we do when the mind is just won't listen, and even though we try to chant, it's so strong. What do we? The answer is here. You're not the mind. That's the answer. You're not the mind. And this agitated relationship between the mind and sense objects, that is part of the field of material energy. And I gave you the example the other day. You all appreciated it very much, of watching a movie, watching cinema. You see? Watching the latest Bollywood flick. So there's Amitabh and there's Aishwarya, and we're sitting and enjoying. We've opened all the doors to our consciousness. We want this to flood in. This is the thing. Bhunkte, Krishna says, Purusha Prakriti Stohi Bhunkte Prakriti Jagunan. The living entity has become situated in the material nature because he wants to enjoy. Now when we're watching a movie that has nothing to do with us, nothing whatsoever to do with us, but yet when we see, as I said, Amitabh gets hit on the head by the bad guy from behind and falls unconscious, we go, oh! You see, it affects us because we are open. We bhunkte. We want to enjoy it. So because we've opened ourselves for enjoyment, we also have to accept the suffering too that comes with it. You see? So the mind and the mind's relationship with the sense objects is all part of that Maya's Bollywood flick, you see? Maya Devi production, starring. And we're open to it. And and then our complaining about our mind is like complaining about what we're seeing in the movie. Oh, Amitabh, he's been captured by the bad guys. How is he going to get free? Maharaj, how is my mind ever going to get free? Well, you're not the mind. This is the material energy. But we're identifying with it so strongly. You see? So this is a very, very perceptive answer by Hamsa Avatar, revealing the whole truth about so-called psychological problems. So, now we want to go from this to understand the real relationship, the proper understanding of our relationship with the material energy. So I put here some terms again that sort of rubbed off. Vyasti, samasti. So these terms are, I'll be speaking in days to come, citing a purport from Srila Prabhupada where he explains these terms. But Vyasti means microcosmic, and samasti means macrocosmic. So this body that we have, this human body, is a microcosm. It's called in Vedic language language, Kshudra Brahmanda. Brahmanda means the universe, and Kshudra means very small. So, when you read the Bhagavatam description of the universe, I mean, we're going to be going into this in detail in a day or two, but when you read the description of the universe, the Mahatattva, what is being described there is the Vishrup of the Lord's universal form. So the universe in toto is a gigantic cosmic body of senses, sense objects, of mind, intelligence, ego, and Vishvatma, the Lord Himself, as the soul of the universe, the Purusha avatar, Sri Vishnu. So this is on the scale called Samasti. Mahavishnu, Srila Prabhupada says, he's on the level of Mahasamasti. That means the all-encompassing field of material reality. All the universes, everything come from Mahavishnu. Garbhodakasha Vishnu, who lies at the bottom of the ocean and is the origin of this particular universe, everything happening within this universe, he is on the level of Samasti. So that means the universe in toto. And you and I, we are Vyasti. But there is a fancy word, congruency. In other words, between these different levels, everything is congruent. The pattern, in other words, the pattern is the same. The ingredients are the same. So here we are in our little, Vyasti microcosmic body, and wondering what should we do. We're assaulted by these senses which we don't know how to control. The mind which is raging, running here and there, speculating so many things, and we're baffled. What to do? So the reference of what to do we get from looking at the Samasti, at the greater plan of the universe, which is presented in the Vedic literatures and the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, on the universal scale, there is, Prabhupada quotes, these terms are from a Vedic verse quoted by Srila Prabhupada in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhoktya bhogyam praritam cha matvam sarvam proktam tri vidam brahmani tat. So, Brahman, the absolute truth, tri vidim means it has three aspects. And the three aspects are, there is an experiencer, a bhoktya, one who is experiencing. There is bhogyam, that which is experienced, energy, matter, and prarita, the controller of both. So, on the Samasti scale, prarita is of course Garbhodakasha Vishnu. Bhoktya, the experiencer, is Lord Brahma. Bhogyam is the material energy in toto, cosmic material energy. In this body, the Kshudra Brahmanda, the little universe of our own individual body, guess who the experiencer is? Who do you think that is? The Atma, the spirit soul. Yes, we are like in this body. You see, because Prabhupada confirmed in this body, there are many other living entities dwelling in this body. In fact, I read that doctors have, medical investigators have done cultures of human skin, because burn victims, the skin is burned off, so they need a quick transplant of new skin. So they actually grow human skin in laboratories. They take some cells and they culture them, and you can get a big patch of skin. You see? Growing. And what does that mean? That means skin is composed of living entities. So this body, the cells of this body, the tissues of this body, so many living entities are there. But there's one living entity who is the chief, just like within this universe. There's one living entity who is the chief, and that is Brahmaji. He is the living entity to whom the Lord is giving the mission. The Lord is revealing to one living entity in this universe what is the reason that this universe exists. And that one living entity is Brahma. So there are so many living entities in this body, but to one alone, the mission of this body is revealed, and that is to the Atma, the one whose consciousness is pervading the whole body and moves out through the senses of the body into the world around. So that is us. So we are the experiencer, and of course matter is there, no need to explain that, and the Lord, Paramatma, the controller of both the experiencer and matter. He is there in the heart. So just as Brahmaji, everything he does is under the order of the Lord. And thus he is the chief demigod. So his position in this universe is sublime. Actually, in the Vedic literature, Brahma, his position, is more or less considered a liberated position. Although he's within this universe and he has a body, but he's more or less Jivan Mukta, because he's established in Vedic knowledge. He is the guru of everyone else. So similarly, we should be like that in this body. We should follow exactingly the duty that is given to us by the Lord. So, now, two realities, two leelas. What does this refer to? Two words here. Paramartha. I'll go to that one first. Paramartha. So the Paramartika Leela. This is what we typically think of Krishna's Leela in Goloka Vrindavan. And we think, of course, we're very far away from that. We should think like that. But then that often will bring up a question in our mind. So what about now? What about here and now? I'm not very Krishna conscious. My consciousness is not able to enter into the Nitya Leela of the Lord. So what is my relationship with the Lord now? So therefore there's this other word, Vyavahar. I want to read to you. Yes, here we have a couplet of verses from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Virad Hiranyagarbhascha Karanam Cheti Upadhyaya Ishasya Yat Tribhirhinam Turiyam Cha Pachakshate. In this material world, the Lord is designated as Virat, Hiranyagarbha, and Karana. This means, Karana means Mahavishnu, Hiranyagarbha means Garbhadaksha Vishnu, and Virat means Chirodaksha Vishnu. So, but beyond these three designations, the Lord is ultimately in the fourth dimension, the transcendental realm. So, the Lord is both transcendental beyond this world and immanent within this world as the master of everything. So Chaitanya Charitamrita goes on to state that Yadapi Tinera Maya Laya Vyavahar, this word, Tatapi Tat Sparsha Nahi Shabde Maya Par. Although these three features, Mahavishnu, Garbhadaksha Vishnu, Chirodaksha Vishnu, these three features of the Lord deal directly with the material energy, none of them are touched by it. They are all beyond illusion. So although they are here, the Lord expands in these Purusha avatars within the material nature, He is still transcendental. So this is also a Leela of the Lord. It's called the Vyavahar Leela. His Leela of Shrishti, Stiti, Pralaya, creation, maintenance, and destruction. This is referred to in the Srimad Bhagavatam as a Leela, another kind of Leela. The Lord's Leela in relationship with the material nature. But it is a Leela. And that is a Leela that is open to us right now. Because we are also here. We are right next to the Lord. So, what is that Leela? That Leela is the Leela of devotional sacrifice, of yajna. The Vedas tell us that this material creation exists. It was created out of yajna. This is an Upanishadic statement, that it was created out of yajna, sacrifice. This is the Purusha Shukta prayer in the Rig Veda is describing that. It's created out of yajna, and it exists for yajna. And this is why we are here. Sacrifice. So this is the, what I'm coming to now is the proper psychological state, or the well-adjusted state of the mind here in this present situation in the material world. We need not be agitated, we need not be disturbed, we need not be speculating as in this voidistic way that, oh, this is so troublesome, how do I nullify it, how do I negate it? No, we have a duty. And that duty is this vyavahar, which means, yes, the prescribed duties manifested in the Vedas for the human being. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said, Dharma samstapana hetu sadura vyavahar, which means that a sadhu is known in this world, a saintly person is known in this world by his behavior. He established dharma, this is spelled wrong, dharma samstapana hetu. So he is known in this world by his behavior. And he establishes dharma because he follows dharma. So this is incumbent upon every human being to live in this world as sadhu. So then we ask, yes, but I'm so attached. The word for attachment is prasanga. Sangha means association. Pra is putting emphasis. So to associate with something very strongly, very closely, means to be attached to it. So we hear, yes, you should be a sadhu, you should do your duty, you should live your life as a sacrifice. We've been explaining that yesterday too, how everything, this is all Krishna's energy, meant simply for his service, and that is the healthy relationship with his energy, him and his energy. One who is established in this healthy relationship, then he can be considered of sound psychology, sound mind. And one who is drawn to gratify his senses in contradiction to the plan of the Lord, then that is unhealthy psychology. So then we may reply, yes, very good, that's a very nice explanation, but I'm so attached. I'm so attached, what to do? So, prasangam ajaram pasam atmana kavyo vidu sa eva sadushukrito moksha dwaram upavritam. Every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul. But that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. So one should conduct one's life in the association of devotees. Because in the association of devotees, then this philosophy that I've been explaining is manifest very, very strongly, very, very practically, concretely. You see, within the association of devotees, the Vaishnava achar, the proper Vaishnava behavior, is very well established, very well maintained. The culture of devotion, the culture of devotional sacrifice is nicely maintained. So we should enter into that association and become part of it. This is like Srila Prabhupada, I remember very beginning of my Krishna consciousness, one of the first lessons that I learned listening to tapes of Srila Prabhupada. He was explaining that the mind is like a crystal stone. So a clear crystal stone, if you place it on a cloth which is red, how will the stone look? It will look red. If you place it on a cloth that is blue, it will look blue. If you place it on a cloth that is yellow, it will look yellow. So yellow, red, blue, these three colors, what do they represent? They represent the three modes of material nature. So it's by our association that the mind is picking up the modes. It's becoming colored by the modes, and thus we take on the behavior and habits that are assigned to these different modes of nature. So purifying the mind is all a question of association, in essence. And if we find, our mind is troubled by lingering attachments, bad habits, that means what? That means we have to increase our association. We have to increase our association with devotees, pure association. And then finally here, I've given a quotation from Srila Prabhupada about this, because this also pertains to psychology. Svajati ashaya shigna snigda sadhu sangha sato bare. So, because yesterday and today we've been talking about relationships. So in that association with devotees, we should look for three things. Svajati ashaya means similar inclination. So we're all individuals, and by our guna and karma we have particular inclinations. So someone who is musical, who has a natural talent for playing musical instruments and singing, he should associate with devotees who are musical, who can teach him to play mridanga, kartals, harmonium, sing bhajans. He'll find that association to be very, very satisfying. So we should seek devotees of similar inclination, but those devotees at the same time should be peaceful, and they should be advanced. And then our association will be very nice. So, as I said, in today's talk we've been concluding points that we started yesterday. So, it's a little early now, it's only 8:30, but I've pretty much come to the end of what I wanted to say. So we'll now open for questions. Yes?
Is that I think you were talking about this macrocosm thing, and Vishishta Advaita by Ramanujacharya is describing this
Yes.
macrocosmic.
Yes. Yeah, this is Vishishtadvaita philosophy. But all these philosophies they're all compact within Achincha Veda Veda Tattva. Srila Prabhupada said, whatever Ramanujacharya has said, we agree. Whatever Madhvacharya has said, we agree. Now, these two philosophies by themselves don't agree. But Prabhupada said from Lord Chaitanya's point, we can agree with all of them. The Achincha Veda Veda Tattva philosophy permits that. It's most supple. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes?
I have a number of questions, but I don't know how to put it in lack of clarity.
Uh-oh.
Yesterday was clear, but today it becomes a little bit murky because we were talking about, yesterday we have the mind and the soul which are separate. Now we have introduced the consciousness. Is that consciousness a product of the... and you're saying the mind is the...
Covering of consciousness.
Covering of consciousness. So, is it the consciousness that is it the mind? How is the...
well,
can you elaborate on the...
this I explained yesterday. This was introductory. That the consciousness is the energy of the soul. And I told you how the Lord has His energy. And she's personified. Just like Radha and Krishna. So, knowledge, we associate the mind with knowledge. So knowledge is another consort of the Lord. Knowledge personified, Vidya, Saraswati. She's also a wife of the Lord. But as Lord Chaitanya says, Vidya Vadhu Jivanam. So for the devotee in the Sankirtan movement, then by the Lord's grace he achieves the life of transcendental knowledge. So the word vadhu means wife. So the
That's the mind.
pure transcendental knowledge becomes like the wife of the living entity by the grace of the Lord. Just like Brahmaji